Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of. We have got Ray with us today, and Ray, we met. Obviously, you didn't. You didn't know me, but I met you through one of the webinars that you attended back in January, and it was with your work with Blader and Gordon, and we know you spoke about all the experience that you've got with road safety, dealing with families and investigating road incidents, as well as all the charities that you help make a difference with. One of the things that we were interested in was when you mentioned that you attend incident scenes in order to prevent a similar occurrences happening. We just wonder if you can kind of like talk a bit about that to begin with.
Yes, indeed. Going back to the 1990s now, which is sort of many, many moons ago by now. And that's when joined up thinking started taking place, really, and made sense of things, because people used to work in isolation before. The police had their work, the Highways Authority had theirs, and the fire service and the ambulance each had their own separate pieces of work that they needed to do in the fatality. But what was sort of found important at that time, and I'm sure it was started in the 90s, that's certainly when I got involved with it. So after every single fatality on any road network, there would be a joint partnership meeting that would include the police that were investigating it, or a representative of theirs. In the older days, it used to be called a traffic management officer. That was the person the police employed that would carry out safety audit on any new roads and things like that. But after the fatality, we'd all get together at the scene and try and work out, before, in the early days after the incident, just to work out, were there any engineering deficiencies on the road? Is there anything the Highways Authority can do to improve that bend, or cut those trees down, or improve signage? It was just all heads together, basically, at the scene to try and prevent a similar occurrence happening in the future. And that's what it was all about. And it still takes place today, a bit more formal today. They compile reports after the visit today and photographs. But in the 90s, it was just all heads together, all the interested parties to try and prevent a similar occurrence. And that's what it boils down to. But very, very important, because, you could travel on the same section of the road 100 times a year. And then something happens, and it's when you stand as a pedestrian and look at the foliage of the trees, or the fence, or any sort of physical feature on the road, and sometimes you would stand out and think, goodness me, why haven't we noticed this driving past?
Yeah. Did you?
When you do a report like that, would it automatically go out to the families, or how would they know that you? Because as far as I'm aware, I don't think that happened in our son's incident. Well, we certainly didn't see anything.
Definitely the same with us. I had to go all around the houses to find out what had been discussed because we didn't have an inquest.
Okay. To be honest, I'm not going on the side track. I've been listening to your podcast in preparation for my sort of taking part this evening, and it's been very interesting, eye-opening, and I'm sure it's been a great help to people going through the same things as yourselves. But to answer your question, the report would normally end up in the collision investigation report as an appendix at the end normally, which shows what work's been done to investigate it and any actions, because quite often the Highways Authority would have actions from the site visits, to improve the white lines, or sometimes to fill a pothole that may have caused some crashes, and that would be highlighted in the report, because that's something the coroner's very interested in. Because, and I'm sure the coroner has the power to issue notice of prevention of future death, which is very important in the world of the coroner. And that's what coroners would look at as part of the report. Have the Highways Authority done anything following the crash to make that particular road safer, if anything was highlighted in the report? Sometimes there'll be nothing at all. Sometimes it'll be a side report, as is well known. It's down to human error, or it's down to the weather, or down to something else. No highway deficiencies whatsoever. But it's important to do just in case, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Mandy, do you want to talk about the Think campaign that Ray was involved in?
Definitely. But I just wanted to so in terms of like families being involved, or Do you think that that's changed over the years? There's more awareness and sort of trying to bring the families in and like communicate with them about things, because yeah, I didn't feel that was the case, but perhaps it has got better than it used to be, but maybe there's still a ways to go.
I suppose, I would say that the family liaison officer role, because the purpose of the family liaison officer is to be the link, the bridge, if you like, between the investigation team and the families that have lost a loved one. It's a very challenging role to do. I had 20 plus years experience of doing it, and it's not for everybody. You've got to be a certain type of person wanting to do that role. In most police force areas, it is a voluntary role that people are asked whether they want to carry it out or not. And a funny story now in the middle of grief and everything is when I joined the police, you get a review every 5 weeks in your probationary period. And I remember my tutor, I think it was week 10, said to me, "Oh, I'm not sure whether you'll make an effective police officer. My opinion is you should be a social worker or a vicar." And that was documented on my week 10 review. And now when you fast forward many years afterwards, when I actually became a family liaison officer, I would imagine that role is a little bit in between possibly a vicar who's caring for their flock and a social worker who's trying to coordinate everything with individuals. But it's a very misunderstood role, even amongst the police.
Yeah.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
It's a very misunderstood role, even amongst the police.
Yeah.
Because when people volunteer to do it, you do it on top of your normal day-to-day policing role. When I started the role, I was part of the neighbourhood policing team. So, my diary was pretty full of meetings, patrols, and doing this, that, the other. And then when there was a death, be it a murder, or murders mostly for me in the beginning of my career, I would have to leave my neighbourhood policing on the shelf for a while in order to focus my attention on those families I was assisting. And sometimes you get not criticised, the wrong word to use, I imagine, but because people who weren't family liaison officers, all he did was visit families and eat cake and drink tea, and lay with chest to the shoulder to cry on. But that's not the role at all. The role is you are an investigator. You're part of the team, and sometimes the lead investigating officer will give you tasks to query the family about certain things, particularly perhaps the lifestyle of the individual that's died, with a bit of a background, what their routines were. And I've had situations as well, especially with murders, and those are the horrible ones to be a family liaison, when you've got suspects within the family. So you are there supporting the families, but also you've got to keep an opinion, and you're investigating and possibly, looking what the picture of that family is. A daughter that's been murdered by the father, or something like that. So it's not a pleasant situation to be in with them. But to me, if anybody asks me, what do I miss after retiring from the police, it is the family liaison officer role. Because
you said that you do some training, because one of the things that I found is, I think you hit the nail on the head. Because my family liaison officer she was really, really good, but I think she felt slightly frustrated with the information that was passed on to her that should have been passed on to us. And I think there is elements, from my experience, with the higher police officers, and especially the investigating officers, that part of the Flo's role is to sit and have a cup of tea and put their arm around us. But actually, that absolutely is not what we want as, families. We want to know what happened. And I guess your focus around murder that is exactly the same as the focus around, our child died, and we absolutely need to know. We don't want any of that rose-tinted spectacles. We don't want, a hug around us. We've got family and friends for that. From the family liaison point of view, we want to know exactly what happened. And so, do you think that there is absolutely more training that needs to be done in that role?
Yes, it's an ongoing process. To be a family liaison officer, you go on a training course, and most forces train FLOs for murders and road deaths. The last 15 years of my service with the police was on the traffic department, so it was more of the road deaths that I dealt with as part of that department. But every individual, every police officer is different. You know, you can meet 10 police officers. Totally, we are humans. I say we. We're having this conversation this morning. I've been retired 3 years, but I still see we. I now work for Slater and Gordon, but for whatever reason, I suppose it's the police family you still feel part of. But each individual goes about it in different ways of what they do for families. You know, an example for me, but you know, each family is different, of course, and each have got their varying demands and expectations. But quite often, you know, I would buy a big bag of tea bags and take it with me to the house because they'd have loads of guests coming to offer their condolences, little things like that. And I'd actually do a lot on behalf of the family, more than what some FLOs do, because the training, it's more about sort of doing what the role entails as part of the investigator. But I think to be a half decent one, you've got to be part of the family in the process in an indirect way. Goodness me, I've arranged, because we've had a couple of deaths in North Wales, which was I was, you know, involved in investigating them, where the individual didn't have any family at all in the UK. One girl from Sri Lanka, she'd been living in North Wales for many years, but her family were all in Sri Lanka. So I ended up arranging a visa for the family to come over, help them arrange the funeral because she'd enjoyed her life in Wales. She wanted to be, you convinced that she wanted to be buried in Wales. So, you know, and the Lithuanian young lady that died in a crash. That was all the crashes are horrible. But the family again in Lithuania. So I was doing all the liaising with Google Translate because they couldn't speak English. So you become a funeral director.
But
so it's such a varied role. But your box standard families, you know, the old problem on telly, to add 2.5 children or something, I think it was called, wasn't it? The average family. But we've had a lot of families, and you can imagine the complex issues with there, where mum and dad had separated. You've got to be very careful then that you give the mum and dad the same information, even though they're not together. You know, or mum will say, "Oh, the FLO told me this," and that's it. "Oh, he didn't tell me that." So, you know, it's a fine balancing act. It's an interesting, it's an honour and a privilege to be an FLO, but a very, very difficult one to manage at times with the needs of families, because some families struggle to appreciate that even though you've got all the forensics, all the science in the world, and CCTV occasionally, but some of the answers to their questions have gone with, unfortunately, the person that's died.
Yeah, that's what we found.
Families struggle to understand that. Yes, you've got the science and the forensics and the skid marks and whatever else you've got left at the scene. You know, there are some answers, you know, that the person has taken with them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the main skills that are communication, basically, because you are basically the link person, but then you're only as good as the information that you're, as Yvonne said, the information that you're being given yourself. But I found
my experience over the years, I find that some lead investigators, and that's what I was at the end. I was, you know, lead investigator. I haven't carried on my FLO role in certain respects, but the lead investigators are sometimes very nervous in what information they've been comfortable in passing families at the right time.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
They've been comfortable in passing families at the right time. Okay, my honest opinion is to be totally honest and frank from the start. However, you've got to be ready to change that tact if there's a court case. And there's potential then, if you tell certain things to the family because you think they should know, you've got to have your trust and faith in that family that doesn't sort of derail the court case. And I've seen that happen in other situations. And sometimes the lead investigator will tell the FLO, you can't tell the family that until court, just in case they go on social media. Something as innocent as putting something on social media could then turn up in court, and then the defence would have a field day. They said, oh, the jury can't make an informed decision on that because that's been on Facebook, or or what have you. So it is a fine balance. But as a good FLO, you would know, you'd get to know your family, and you'd be able, you'd need to trust them with certain bits of information and tell them,
Yeah.
listen, this stays between your family here. Just go anywhere, because if it does, you're in risk of jeopardizing the whole case. And some families, they get that, and you get to know them. But as you can imagine, human beings, just like FLOs, some of the families, there are some families you decide yourself, I don't think I should tell them this because they're going to go off. And of course, how they could jeopardize. So I can understand your frustration possibly for not getting the information, and that's possibly down to that particular LIO's past bad experience of other families, which is wrong to gauge. I know, but the FLO should know you, and the FLO should be able to make an informed decision as to what should be shared at what times. I would always tell families from the outset, there are things they will ask me. If I know the answer, I will tell you. If I don't, I will do my best to find out. There are some things you may ask me that I will not be able to answer you for legal reasons until a suitable time. And when you explain why, most people get that. It's, as you said, it's the communication, and you've got to be a good communicator in order to be in a good FLO. But the sad thing is that there's a shortage of them nationally. Some police forces have tried recruiting more by when they're advertising a role as a road policing officer, they will include in the job description, you will also be trained to be an FLO. But I know many police officers, many excellent police officers, but they'd make rubbish FLOs, and they'd be the first to admit to that. So I would like to be this.
How often are they trained? Are they just trained on a one-off, or is it like safeguarding training? Because I work in a primary school, we have like safeguarding training every single year. Or if we do anything like prevent training is every 2 years. So how often are the FLOs given any kind of training?
Right, well, the initial training is the main one. From memory, I think that lasts possibly 2 weeks, something between 5 and 10 days, I'd imagine. Because in my role now as Lieutenant Gordon, I actually visit some police forces to take part in this training, like other sort of inputs do. Just to give you a sort of rough, very sort of quick tour of the FLO training, really. They'd have an input, obviously, on the lead investigation, how the links between them and the FLO. They'd have victim support doing the presentation. Quite often they would have families coming in as well, like a bit of, not a case study per se, but families who either say how fantastic their FLO deployment was, or it was brilliant apart from this. And obviously that's important for new FLOs to see where others have gone before them, wrong. Coming back to me personally, because I had so many years experience of being one, if an FLO deployment had gone the wrong way with some families, I used to get parachuted in order to take, get the recovery of the service back, if you like. And I can remember that one, as we said before, all fatals are tragic, totally unexpected, most of them, of course. But this particular one, the young man had been decapitated, and the FLO just couldn't get around to telling the mum that he had been. And the mum found out when they opened the inquest. That's something that she shouldn't know. And that's, as brutal and horrible as it is, you've got to give the plain truth as it is, especially with things like that. Because they are going to find out, it might not be the right time to tell them on the day one when you meet them. You've got to get your timing right. So that's included as part of the FLO training as well, the do's and don'ts based on, what's gone wrong and what's gone good in the past.
Well, that was one of the key things that I was like, I do remember worrying about, because I was deliberating with myself about whether to see the body, but I wasn't sure what state it would be in, and they couldn't really tell me. And because my stepbrother was also killed in a road accident, and my other stepbrother went to see him, and he said it was the worst thing that he did, because his head was so that he that's the thing that he remembered, and he didn't want to remember that. And so I agonized over that. I agonized because I didn't have any information.
What I always did in those cases was I would go to see the body myself first, and I would have a look, before even inviting the family in or arranging a time at the mortuary, so that then I can prepare them as to what the body's going to be look like. And it's going to be brutal and honest. In some cases, there would be a Home Office post-mortem, which is the forensic one that you see on programs like Silent Witness on telly. The standard post-mortem, just what it does on the tin, basically, it covers to see what the cause of death was. But if there's a hint of the prosecution, that's normally a Home Office post-mortem. That's carried out far more in depth, far more. The standard is in depth. Don't get me wrong. It's still sort of a pleasant thing. So obviously, sometimes the viewing of the body would be after the post-mortem. Sometimes it would be before, depending on the situation in the mortuary and what the coroner. Because with some instances, the coroner can say, I've only ever had 2 cases like that where the coroner said, nobody's going to be allowed to see this body. It's in such a bad state.
Yeah.
And in that way, I would be talking to the families, be brutally honest with them, and explaining that, listen, when did you see your loved one last? And they say, it was last Thursday or whatever. And
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
your loved one last, and they say, it was last Thursday or whatever. And they waved goodbye last time we saw them. Yeah. So I would tell them, well, listen, I've got family myself. I have seen the body of your son, your daughter. I would want you to have that as a lasting memory. I would much prefer you to have that lasting memory of the smiling, goodbye wave that you had last Thursday. And then once you communicate that, most families get it. Some will insist, even though you've explained to them, what have you. And then obviously sometimes they faint in the mortuary, but at least you're prepared for them. There's no FLO should ever sort of just take them in through one door and see the body without preparing it. It has happened, unfortunately, for whatever reasons.
Yeah. I think it brings us back to what you said before, Ray, when you said that it's better to be open and honest and actually get to know the family beforehand, because obviously our Flo I know for a fact that she hadn't been to she just told us that Jack was at the coroner's in the hospital and in the mortuary, and it was when we got to the hospital, the first question that we asked was, is he okay? Are we going to be shocked? I was concerned about his face, because obviously, that's what we want to see. And the the coroner in the hospital was so amazing, but that didn't come from the Flo. That came from the person in the mortuary, and they were so kind and so loving. And so again, I suppose what you're saying is that there's probably needs to be a bit more of a tightening up with regards to what the Flo information that the Flo gives us as a family.
Sure. I possibly have a different act of doing things, as each person does, doing whatever job they do. But for me, you've met me as an FLO in the early days. The person in the hospital, all hospitals have bereavement officers, and that's probably the person you saw. But my tact on it is, because I'm going to be spending a lot of time with the families initially, why do I need to introduce them to other people? I would take the burden off the other people, because they've got to trust me, hopefully within the first few days of meeting me. And I would then hold their hands through the different processes. It's easier and swifter for the persons concerned, and then there's no misunderstanding either, is there? Because you're dealing, with your trusted FLO, hopefully. But work and time constraints are difficult, especially nowadays. I know I hear horror stories where FLOs have got 6 families on the go, as well as trying to do their day job, which doesn't help.
That's definitely my experience. Was the resources, that my FLO was constantly having time off, because they'd been doing like very long hours, because I guess it's because police resources were constrained, and it was quite difficult to communicate. He was very good, but there was gaps between communicating, because he was obviously doing other things and he was on leave quite a lot of the time.
And it depends what the nature of your FLO is as well, because
Yeah.
they could come from all sorts of the
Mm.
police departments. For me, I was pretty lucky for the last 15 years. I was on the roads policing unit, so I was the roads policing officer, which would give me access, of course, to the collision. Because I'd been there, because one thing I insist on, whenever I was deployed as an FLO, I'd want to go to the scene myself before going to see the family,
Yeah.
so that I'll have a picture in my mind of what the scene looks like.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to transfer that information then to the family, because there's nothing worse than the family's asking you, oh, where exactly was it? Was it on that bend that goes by
Yeah.
Yeah.
that blue Benz? And if I hadn't been there, and not guessing that I'm going by grid references or photos, but if you've been there yourself, you know, you've seen where the cars ended up if you're there when the scene's still open. So you know yourself in order to explain properly then to families. And I think that's, especially in mine, that was very important for me to get my head around the scene before, seeing the family.
I think the family liaison officers need to come from the police, or could they be, you know, maybe people like ourselves that have actually been through the process? And I'm obviously just talking about, you know, road death here. Or is it that they have to come through the police force?
It does have to come from the police force to be the official police family liaison officer. You don't necessarily have to be a police officer, because we have a number of forces now, what's called evidence gatherers, and they tend to be retired police officers like myself who have gone back to work, you know, part-time or whatever, as an evidence gatherer, and they make very good family liaison officers based on the experience they have. But the sideline of what you've just asked is we've got fantastic charities like, you know, Road to Peace. I listen to you.
Yeah.
They'd be very good with yourselves, and Road to Peace. I've done a lot of work with Robin and various other staff members of Road to Peace. They are truly dedicated to their role. They're passionate.
Yeah.
And they're such caring people. And what's good for the FLO is that they can take a little bit of the burden, if you like, from the FLO by being there, offering the more of the emotional and the signposting side of things. And that's been, you know, when I started in the FLO, we didn't have, you know, that break is another one.
Yeah.
You know, police and crime commissioners, they didn't exist at the time when I was in FLO many months ago, but they now fund a lot of these caseworkers that break, Road Peace, and Aftermath is the Northwest one as well, which is fantastic. We're so lucky, I say we again, the police are very lucky to have the extended police family, if you like. But in my current role with Slater and Gordon, you know, the lawyers, we've got a fantastic team of lawyers. I know you know Will yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing when I started working for them, realising how passionate all our lawyers are about their casework. You know, it's not just the Monday to Friday job they have.
No.
They really do care about the families. And my sort of role, if you like, with them is a bit like a family liaison officer with some of the families who have struggled to understand the reasons behind some of the police decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm able to go in with my old police hat on and have a conversation with those families and possibly explain why things have happened in certain ways. And that's been, you know, that I think that's been a handy tool for Road Peace and but not more for Road Peace with myself.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
For Road Peace and but not more for Road Peace with myself, because Break have their own caseworkers. And it's nice for me because you feel that you're still able to help families to make sense occasionally of, you know, something they've got in their minds that they haven't had the answers from the police, or perhaps it hasn't been explained well enough. What I get very often is, why does it take so long for the mobile phone to come back to families? And the honest answer with that is the people that examine mobile phones in the police, it's a very small team normally, and they are the same team that look into phones of people who have, you know, caused child abuse and, you know, paedophiles' mobile phones. So it's the same team you have. So they are more important in the police world because those are, you know, real sort of offenders, if you like, that need to go before the courts. Whereas the phone of the person that's died in a road crash is on the shelf until they've got time to look at it. Yeah. I know that sounds bad, but in the court light of day, they have to prioritise what forms they look into. And once families understand, oh, right, I get it, yeah, I know now then. And, you know, the toxicology result is similar. They take ages to come back to most police forces because you've got the same scientists that check the toxicology of the dead person. It's the same scientists normally that checks for cancer cells amongst people like you and me who may have tests.
Wow.
So it's more important for them to look after the living to make sure that they get the cancer treatment earlier than somebody who's died in a road crash. The blood sample or the urine sample is on the shelf until the scientists have got time to do it and compile the report. I say they do the test pretty quickly. It's just the report that takes time, isn't it? But,
Yeah.
but explain that to people. They all right, I do get it. And coming down to the communications again, isn't it? And we
Yeah, of course.
things to families.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, I tell you what, we absolutely need more of you,
Yeah.
because even with Slater and Gordon, you absolutely said it right, that they're another organisation that just gets it. And you know, I've worked for law firms back in the day, and but Slater and Gordon, the work that they do with Road Peace and the way that they have handled our case and how they speak to myself and my family, they are very direct. They give us the information that they feel that we need. They were the ones that actually advised us not to look at the CCTV, because they said, obviously, it's entirely up to you. But if it was us, you know, if it was me and it was my son, there's no way I would want to look at that, because it is really, really hard. It's hard watching. And we've really appreciated that honesty, because we made the decision quite early on then that we wouldn't look at the CCTV. And that's what we need. We just need honest, direct information from people that, yeah, and you can tell straight away, even from just speaking to you on here, Ray, that you really care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably where my tutor thought I should be a vicar or a social worker. You know, police officer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I suppose maybe summarising it up, because you obviously do your charity work. So where do you think there are the areas that need tightening up on, and you know, and where you can support families like us?
Well, I think we've gone off on different tangents like would normally happen with these things, I'm sure. But going back to your initial question about the training for FLOs, what I would like is, and what I get involved with my colleague Steve, Steve's an ex-Lancashire police officer. Both of us work for Slater and Gordon, and we've got people like rehabilitation coordinators, people who would sort of, especially for somebody who's been seriously hurt in a crash but hasn't died,
Yeah.
that they go to their homes to see what adaptations, things that needed. So what I would like, and I think that would help families in an indirect way, is that police forces have more CPD days. They do have them now and again, and then where people like yourselves,
Yeah.
Steve, and from other law firms as well would attend and give them the benefits of our experience as ex-police officers, as ex-FLOs, hoping that they would learn from that, and you know, to keep their knowledge updated based on some cases that Slater and Gordon have dealt with, where families have told them, well, listen, that didn't quite go right. Hoping then that would benefit those individual FLOs from across all the police forces in the UK. And we've done a couple of forces. I go to Cumbria, Humberside, North Wales for myself, and quite a few other force areas, West Midlands, where you know, and you just play a part in it, and it's just going to that extended family, isn't it? Rather than going back to the 90s where people were isolated, you know, the police did this, the council did that, so that we all work together. Because at the end of the day, a good law firm should work hand in hand with the investigation team, because if there's a civil case as well, you know, it goes hand in glove. Because very quickly, I know time's running out, but you know, there was an offender, he went to court, that offender had a £500 fine and 6 points on his licence for hitting a cyclist. The cyclist got his knee amputated, went to a civil claim, that was 3.5 million, including, you know, a bungalow, a house built for that offender. So you look at the justice system, 6 points and £500 fine compared to a single action of 3.5. And I think that's why the civil world and the police world should get together a bit more often to help each other out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ray, like you said before when we first spoke, we could talk and talk and talk. And but we're obviously limited on time, but we are so grateful.
Yeah.
I think the information that you have given will go a long way to help and support the families that we want to reach out to. And but no doubt, if you're happy, we would love to have you on our podcast again.
No worries. It's been a pleasure to meet you both on here. And as I said, I was only listening the day before I was listening to all your other podcasts to get to know a bit about you both. And I'm sure you've been a great sort of inspiration and help to people going through the same things as you have.
Thank you.
Ray, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.